Technology, software has been democratized, and that means anybody with a laptop and an idea can set something up. Do you want to be somewhere where you can have an impact on the future of the company, where you can build systems, you can learn an awful lot yourself, you can have a good time as well. I'm always interested to know what's out there, because you've got to protect your back as well. You're never too sure in startups what's going to happen around the next corner.
So hello and welcome to another episode of Startup Dynamics, the final episode of season 1. And who's the best to round up our season than Jonny Quirk?
Good to see you, Jonas. Great to be here.
It's the reason I'm calling you the perfect guest is just because you've been all around and everything startups, right? You worked in startups, you worked on your own startup, then at WeWork Labs you actually advised a lot of startups and seen a lot of things going on. So I really just want to jump in very quickly to start off this conversation with the pros and cons, essentially, that you've seen both working in a startup and then working on your own.
Yeah.
Obviously you learn a lot of lessons along the way.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people do debate whether they should join one or start their own.
Yeah.
So what would those be from your experience?
Cool. Well, great to be here, Jonas. I'm 39, so I am a startup survivor, but there's hopefully plenty more years in the tank from me before that. Look, I mean, there are many pros and cons, I think, to actually working in a startup. First off, you don't feel like you're tied to just one job for the rest of your life. I don't think there is a job for life anymore, unless you work in banking or a profession like doctor or law or something like that. So I think ultimately, if you like living in a fast-paced environment, if you like working with interesting people, if you like, really great benefits and actually being able to build something from scratch, it's amazing. There's a real adrenaline and positivity that you see around startups. It doesn't kind of go your way every day, but you do learn an awful lot in a very quick space of time. You learn that from making mistakes, but you also learn it from wins. And obviously it's just a case of keeping yourself fairly grounded in the middle and going, right, okay, do you know what I mean? Let's not get too excited about this, but let's not get too down when something doesn't work out. Learn from those experiences. I think probably on the cons, I haven't really discovered too many cons so far, apart from, say, when something really doesn't work out. Use my own business as an example. You put heart and soul into something, it really does kind of become something, which takes over your entire life. You're constantly on the investment kind of cycle. And you think you're doing well and you are making tangible efforts chucking away at it, but actually on the other side of the coin is when you do reach the point where you say, let's bite the bullet and close that one, you leave it and go, right, I've just invested a certain amount of X amount of my life into this, but time heals all wounds. You get to a point and you go, right, I'm ready to jump on the horse again. Yeah. You have to learn from those mistakes, you kind of move on, and then you realize that next time you do it, it's going to come out better. So it's a constant evolution, really, of your own skills, your ability, your emotional intelligence, building up a thick skin, just basically being able to do this. And I've worked in many startups, like you said, all over the world, and that's what I love, about it so much. It's interesting. I would say, like I said, going back to the start of this, it's not something where you have a guaranteed job for life. Think of these as mini sprints. You might get 1 or 2 years out of some might be 4 or 5 years, some you might make decent money on stock options and exits and stuff like that. Some might be mini projects, a bit like the WeWork Labs. I love that job. I was mentoring new startups coming through. That filled me with excitement every day. So it's all a rich tapestry to say during that, but you reach a point where you learn a lot about yourself and you enjoy it. That's why I love this gig. It's so great. I've probably been doing this now for about 14 years, and it's really enjoyable.
You mentioned you're doing it for 14 years.
Yeah.
Because I'm 22 at the start. Kind of for the past 5 years, I've always seen working for a startup or being an entrepreneur, starting your own business. It's something that's been viable that you can readily do because of the internet and everything and the resources you have.
Yeah.
Was that something when you were kind of my age and looking to start your career that was available for you?
It's a great question, man. I think nowadays, and I'm saying this as an older statesman here, so like I said, a few months I turned 40, but it probably wasn't a viable, entrepreneurs back in the day were your Richard Bransons or something. Do you know what I mean? Don't forget when I went to university, ordering from something off Amazon was a novelty. It was like, wow, I'm ordering a book here or something. How exciting! But I think, like you just said, technology, software has been democratized, and that means anybody with a laptop and an idea can set something up.
Yeah.
You don't even need to code. You can bring something to market. You can bring out a landing page, an MVP. You can get something and kind of test the water. Obviously there's some entrepreneurs that go into it at a young age. But I would basically say to anybody who's got what they feel is like the winning idea is to really put it to action, really put some effort into doing it, do some market research, find out, like if there is kind of like a willingness, for your product, but you can do it. But yeah, it's a much different situation than what it was when I came out of university. I always probably knew I wanted to start a business, but I didn't know what that was. It was definitely not in technology. Obviously it wasn't in apps, it wasn't in software. But you kind of fall into it. Yeah. That's how I got into it. You kind of just fall into kind of like companies which seem interesting and exciting, and then you get the bug. You catch the bug as you go along. Yeah. I was lucky enough to go to South by Southwest in 2012 for the tech conference there, and I think that was the time when it really got me excited about tech. It really kind of made me think about startups and seeing how big they can grow and the scalability of them. That was when it kind of sealed the deal that it wasn't, when you're running a business, it isn't just all about you earn £1 and then you'll spend that pound to maybe make £2.
Yeah.
It was more about how big could you take this if you have an idea, talking about addressable markets around the world. How can you actually go thinking bigger than just your town or your city or even your country? And that, it's inspiring, I think that's it. So, to answer your question, nowadays, yes, you could go in there and do it. You got a crazy idea, man. Don't leave Jonas here, but maybe go and test it out on the side. Yeah. But everything is democratized. For probably less than $1,000, you could probably go out there now and have an amazing landing page. You could do some micro ads. You could do some kind of market research. You could put it out in the world. See if people buy. You start making a few quid, and then who knows? That's when it literally just becomes that. If you can work out that growth equation, the secret sauce, then you can just keep piling more money on it, and the next Elon Musk.
Yeah.
How do you? Because everybody has ideas, right? And everybody goes, "Oh, this is the one. Right? This is the $1 billion one, right?" How do you actually evaluate your ideas? What have you noticed are maybe the best practices to evaluate your ideas?
Yeah, it is to be honest, the way you've set this up makes sense, because actually, do you know what? Everybody has ideas. We're always having ideas. We're always writing them down if we're at a shower. Oh, that's a great idea. That could be it. I think, I would probably say is probably one of the number one things really is to spend that time doing your research actually out there. Almost build yourself a mini deck. That's what I do with any idea that I want to validate. Build myself an investment deck. Is this investable from day one?
So do you see yourself as an investor, or preparing this to a potential investor?
Just preparing it for a fantasy investor.
Yeah.
Because you actually have to go through the process. So everything what's the executive summary? Can I sum it up in 3 lines or whatever like that? What's the addressable market? Where could this go? What's the competitive research? If I bumped into an investor tomorrow and I had something to show them, this is how quality I would want it to be, and it gives me a really good angle. Then I've done all my research, I get it. And, that might only take a few hours, a few days to put together, but it kind of scratches that itch and gets you professionally thinking, whether it's a juice bar or a new $1 million app or something. Do your research. If there's 10 of these already, then maybe it's already been done or something. But if you feel like you've got something, then you go, oh right, okay. And that's, I think, one of those steps where a lot of people, myself included in the past, have come up with something. We like the idea, we think it's going to work, but maybe that early due diligence just hasn't been done yet. Do your work before you probably spend a penny on it, is what I would say.
Yeah. Is there an actual reason it's not done yet, right? And you don't actually need money, to think about would an investor invest in this doesn't necessarily mean that you will need the money.
Yeah.
But it's if you were to do that, an investor will look at all those things.
Yeah.
To be a viable business.
It's true. Look, I ran this app called Beer Adventures.
Yeah.
For me, it was I love beer. No, I don't drink as much beer anymore now, unfortunately. As again, I'm not saying I'm some old man, but the older you get, the more hangovers you get. Right. So I definitely don't drink in the week. But my idea is, beer tourism was a big thing. So I knew there was a wave, there was a trend, there was an industry. Mix that with travel, you've got an addressable market. Like lots of people go on holiday every year, lots of people travel, lots of people love beer. Can you do this? So in my mind, bringing this out, the idea was, I'm blending two markets here. This is going to work. I bootstrapped to about 25,000 app downloads, mainly through content marketing, mainly through SEO, did some experiments with paid, but didn't really see much kind of like return on that. But I think the number one thing that for myself was business model. Going back to that first thing, doing yourself an investment deck, you don't have to have the business model fully figured out, but it's probably worth looking at 2 or 3 scenarios of what that business model could be, because it's going to change, but you do definitely need to make money. And that's one of the problems I had, was I tried 2 or 3 business models when I was in the weeds, when I'd earned investment, when I had staff, when I was going down this route, and it was difficult to kind of pivot in real time to get that. So I think, just having almost those deep thoughts and thinking of it. And then if you know other people that are connected in terms of startups, in terms of smart brains or whatever, pull that out, share that investment deck with them. Have they got a startup? This is why it's really important to build up a big network. If you've actually been able to be, if you've actually got to be restrained with yourself, cut the fat off your investment deck, make it something people are actually going to read, make it 12 pages, nice pictures, literally just the basic bullet points. Get that out there and get their opinion, because they're going to look at it more. You send them a 40-page business plan, they're just going to be falling asleep. They're not going to do it. So get it, double validate, triple validate, maybe test with some of your market. Look, if beer fans who are going to go on holidays, it's worth checking in with them. Even if they're friends, they'll still tell you the truth. Would you use
and
this?
This kind of thing as well is good, because it's just, hey, come for a beer, right? And that's your market research.
Oh man, yeah, I've spent far too much at Cafe Beer Moth. Do you mean like that? Doing like kind of, app testing and stuff like that? But exactly, yeah, where you just literally right, well that's another bug we found. But is it because I've had too many beers? Another reason you've actually got to put it on there, it's like, you've got to also think about how this is going to work in real life. So whether you run a fintech or whether you run a sports business or whatever, you've got to almost think through in real life, like what is the user experience going to be like? So for me, my app used to take people to 6 different bars, whether they're in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Manchester. But the problem was that, people would check into the first bar, and then after half an hour they'd be pinged and they'd be taken to another bar. So they were going on a beer tour powered by an app. The problem was, once people start having a beer, they enjoy being in bar number 1 or bar number 2. They might have had too many beers and leave their phone on the bar or something. They've maybe dropped out and gone, oh, actually, do you know what I mean? I can't be bothered. Or even they can't use it when they've had too much to drink. So, you've got to think through these things, like what's that user experience going to be like? But, these are many kind of different ways you can kind of put that out.
You definitely have to do the unscalable, right? Like we do the same with Orfi Active. Like we go to the sessions, we actually see how they use the app and like when are they actually picking up the phone, when the payments are taking place.
Definitely, It's really important. I think, validation is so important. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if I was going to start another startup today or tomorrow, and there probably will be one at some point in the near future, I'm not saying near future, but, like some point in the future, it's one of those things, I would definitely do my due diligence first, spend plenty of time doing it, think about it, make sure that it's out in the market. Because at the end of the day, an idea, somebody might come along and steal your idea, and that's always the worry of entrepreneurs or startup founders, like, oh, what if somebody else does? But it's bloody hard work to get it to market.
When did you feel you're ready? Because the thing is, like, did you work in a startup before starting your own?
A few, yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of, I guess you saw a bit of ins and outs. Like, was there a time you're like, okay, I've learned enough, I have this idea, I'm ready to go, or was it more on the fly?
It was. I mean, there was, you bear in mind in terms of where you are in your life. So, I knew it was going to be like, have to happen one day. So, I worked for a startup in London, but actually used to be based in Manchester, but used to run a lot of operations in the UK, Europe and US. I was there for about 5 or 6 years. Then I joined Yelp and was marketing director there for UK and Ireland for almost 4 years. And, Yelp, big startup, NASDAQ listed. You learn an awful lot from it, it was all about that, and again, even when I was there and I was exceptionally happy, it was one of my favorite jobs of all time, it was always like, right, when this ends one day, now is going to be the next time to do it, now is going to be the time, so you learn as much, you're training on the side, you're constantly reading business books and magazines and stuff like that, and when Yelp did decide to make everybody international redundant because they said they were going to decamp to the US. They couldn't compete with TripAdvisor and Google and stuff like that. That just seemed the perfect opportunity. It was just like, this is a sign, now is the time to go out there and do it really. And, and I'm pleased that I did, and, a lot of learnings, but, for the next startup, it's all ready.
So even though you felt ready, what was the one thing that you can point out that really still surprised you when you started your own thing?
I would say being a sole founder, after being around a team for a long time, it was not necessarily a lonely place. I think that's a lazy way of kind of describing it, but you realize quite how everything is on you, and you've really got to kind of have deep focus, and you don't want to get distracted by the shiny thing really. I probably went back probably too much. I probably went back to my skill set, which is content, community, whatever, where I actually probably should have been spending more time on business model, on the actual kind of business day-to-day dynamics. I thought I was doing the right thing, by organically bootstrapping, shitloads of people basically to use the app. But wouldn't it have been amazing if I got 25,000 app downloads and the funnel was created so that actually the business model was right, and that would have turned into £250,000 or £25,000 or whatever was at the bottom of the funnel. I think it's one of those, again, you learn from that. The first thing I would do next time is work on the business model, make sure those funnels are in place so you've got a really steady, froth kind of like coming in your top of funnel.
If you did it again?
If I found the right co-founder, yeah, I wouldn't just be like, my next door neighbor wants to start a business. Yeah. Let's do it together, because actually, I am quite single-minded as well. I've learned to be malleable. Another thing that you learn from being in a startup, you've got to make sure that you leave your ego at the door, and you can constantly be taking in new ideas and working with people who's got different ideas, and realize it's not just all about you trying to push your agenda. But I think I found the right co-founder, and somebody who had experience, somebody who'd been there and done it, had either won or lost or whatever, and there was complementary skill sets, then I think that would be great, divide and conquer, that sort of thing. I think sole founders work on many levels, and I've seen some very successful solo founders, but I think, probably going into it, especially on an investable level, I raised some seed investment, which was great, but I think kind of when I was going for that next check size, that was again feedback that came back from investors was like, well, your team is you and a couple of part-time people, or you've now got one full-time, but where's the bench? Where's your CTO? Where's your, I would say, marketing director, but where's the deep bench? Where's that investable team that we're able to invest in? It de-risks it for investors.
Because you become the company, right?
Yeah, and you do everything, and you're working ridiculous hours. Which again, I would again probably learn from that and realize it didn't need to be ridiculous hours. But you're thinking like, I'm gonna work, I'm gonna, make this a success. But I'm not that person now. It's like, I've learned, to kind of cut my cloth. In my current role, I'm, head of content and community at Subkit, which is a new startup that's going to be coming out of private beta, towards the end of 2021. And, I love that. It's a really great kind of experience. But I am working fairly long hours. Maybe 10, 11-hour days. But that's cool because actually what I'm working on actually feels manageable.
And funnily enough, they're focused on solopreneurship, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And I think that's what I love. I love, there is something more to it. And I think that's probably also, maybe I should add this as well, Jonas, like on startups. If you're working on something which you feel's got an impact on the world, then that's really exciting, or it's something that pushes your buttons and makes it interesting. Beer. Great, I love beer, I get to work with interesting people, I get to work with breweries and bars. Now I get to work with solo entrepreneurs, small business owners. It's great, I'm not working with macro brands or whatever. Yelp was the same, we got to work with, local business owners who literally put their entire life on the line to open a coffee shop, to run that Mexican taco joint, to do whatever. So, as long as there's something in it that you actually, that you're making some impact on the world and you're actually doing it for the right reasons, and there's some kind of higher level beyond like stock options and decent wages and all those things, then I think that's what you need. You need the double motivation to get out of bed to do it really. That's when you put the hours in, but you actually doesn't feel like you're doing the hours.
But initially, kind of, was that a hard step to take? I know you're talking about all the positives now, but going from an employee in this kind of secure environment into working ridiculous hours and being a founder, was that kind of a hard thing to convince yourself to do, or?
No, not in the slightest, man, to be quite honest. It was just like, you were just like, you had an idea and you wanted to test it out, you wanted to validate it, you wanted to kind of get it out. Don't get me wrong, there was a couple of times when I really wish I'd switched off LinkedIn, like jobs kind of notifications, because, like you're having a bad, say, week. And, bad is bad, but, you start thinking like, right, what's happening here? And all of a sudden your dream job would come out. I remember being offered a job of a, like head of marketing for like really big American brewery. And I was just like, she was just like, are you taking the piss? Like, damn you, God, do you know, say, are you tempting me now with this job? I went down to London, I thought, I've got to take the interview. I've got to do this. Yeah.
And this is when you were a founder?
Yeah, this was when I was a founder. I'd probably been a year in, do you mean? And even throughout my entire life, if the job seems interesting, I will take an interview with somebody. I'll take a call or I'll do an interview. I'm always interested to know what's out there, because you've got to protect your back as well. You're never too sure in startups what's going to happen around the next corner. So I don't just take 10 interviews a week or whatever. But if something really suitable comes along and you think, I just want to find, I just want to test this out and see it, then you go for it. You can learn a lot from it. You can learn even a lot about your own business from actually chatting with people about it. But anyway, this kind of like job came up and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like if this had come up when I wasn't a founder, I'd have been like, I'm really, really interested, very innovative, very,
what was the thing that kept you at it rather than taking the job?
Well, this is it. I knew it would have, look, the salary, the whatever, the benefits that, do you think you could go to California, like, twice a quarter or something like that? Really? Yeah, sure. That wouldn't be a problem whatsoever. But I was still very single-minded. There was never a point when I went, I'm really, there was something in my mind. I remember having calls with to California, would you do this? Would you do that? How do you see yourself building this team out? I was doing it. It was interesting. It was very good for my knowledge and skills, and actually almost your own ego. You're doing this, but there was still something that constantly said, like, I'm not going to take this. Yeah. I was still very, very driven. It was like I needed to see this out to whatever the end game is. I felt like I'd be letting myself down. Even my wife, I remember talking it over with her and like, look, you've wanted to do this. I know you kind of like don't have a pot to piss in really, in terms of actually, how much money you're, paying yourself a very small wage. But actually, it was more about like, you want to see it, like, because then if I didn't do this, when the next startup idea comes around, do I trust myself? Can I look myself in the mirror and say that?
It's interesting because, sorry mate, just because I can really relate to that, just because like I get like LinkedIn stuff.
Yeah.
Like constantly, right? And it's that kind of, it is hard.
Yeah.
To keep at it, but at the same time, I think it's nice validation. You said like for your ego, it's like, I'm still one.
It is.
It feels like if say shit hits the fan, like you're okay, kind of, right? Because you still got that.
Yeah, you've always got to. It's a balance because you've got to make sure as well that you get your headspace right in terms of being. Look, whatever. If I was offered a job today, and I'm very, very happy with what I'm building, an early stage startup, there is very, very, very minimal chances I would take it. I'm just not in that mode. I'm 100% committed. I'm really, really excited about the mission, etc., etc. But it is always, if somebody does reach out, it's just always interesting to learn a little bit more. I'm not saying, like I said, you get all this shit on LinkedIn all the time. It's like if something is an incredibly great fit or it seems like, an amazing startup, because, it's always worth finding out exactly about other startups as well and what they're doing as well. That job might have long gone, by the time things either work out or you exit or whatever. But it's you just got to keep yourself. You don't have a closed mind about anything really. Yeah. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say. Well, I'm kind of glad you kind of went in there because you both reaffirmed the point. From my point of view, it's like there's this stereotypical view that if you go into your own business, if you become a founder, it's kind of all or nothing, and you're taking this big plunge.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, then it's the end of the world. But you two are saying that actually when you're in that, you've still got loads of options where you can go and do a different thing.
Yeah.
And maybe it's people not realizing that that's stopping them from starting their own thing, not thinking that, if it doesn't go well, then there's still plenty out there for you to do.
Yeah, I think massively. Like, we kind of build these boxes, our own cages ourselves, as humans, like we say, we can't do this or we can't do that. But, I think you've got to be flexible, malleable, whatever. Just keep an open mind about things. Make sure that whoever you're either working for or your own startup, that you are 100% focused. Do you know what I mean? Because, you've got to be. You've got to do it, and you've got to be excited. Because I think if you're not excited about what you're doing, then maybe it is the time to start thinking about leaping and doing something different. But, a lot of people I know have set up side hustles first. They've done some validation. They've worked stuff out. Like maybe they're doing a full-time job and then they start doing something in the evenings. It doesn't. For me, that doesn't really work. Personally, I find it very difficult to split my brain between two things.
The business was interesting because there was this fear of everybody's building careers, working at Google's and whatever, right? And they get this reputation of being an expert at this one thing. And when you're doing a startup, you're doing a bit of everything at the same time, almost like you're not an expert in anything.
Yeah.
So it's if shit hits the fan, then what are you? What are you expert in? And I think at first it was a fear, at least for me.
Yeah.
But then as time went by, and especially in today's world, you can create essentially your own job in a way, even if at a company it doesn't have a name for it.
Yeah.
Right? You can be product lead, you can be marketing director, you can be whatever, because it doesn't matter, but the company inside out from many aspects. And that's actually a lot more even valuable than being really, really good at just one thing sometimes.
It is. I mean, look, I think it's one of those things as well, early on, you do worry, about your career development. I don't, we all don't want to be 60, pushing trolleys in, the supermarket. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, if that's your gig, that's great. But I think you don't want to get to a point where you're just shit, have I become unemployable? Because you've just been doing these unspecified roles in startups for many years. But actually, I think, if you've got this ability to wear many hats and, you're picking up a bit of marketing, you're picking up a bit of whatever. My jobs, I'm trying to think now, I've been a head of operations, which again is really interesting. In this early stage startup, employee number one. Been head of marketing, been a community growth manager, community marketing director. I've been, like I said, a startup advisor. I've done consultancies. Right now, I find myself as head of community and content. So, again, constantly learning about SEO best practices and content marketing, which I hadn't done for a few years. You become someone who's, hires people. You get used to interview training. You get used to kind of social media spend. You get used to HR. So you're constantly learning stuff. You might only have 20, 30, 40% of your bucket filled in terms of your knowledge. But, you find yourself fairly adaptable, really. And, it wouldn't really appeal to me right now if, say, Google gave me a job and said, do you want to be a drone in, some random office in somewhere? You'd be a bit well, if it was work on some special project or something, great. But, I think early stage startups are at least, startup where it's fairly small, 100, 200 or something, is the sweet spot, I think, for me.
To be fair, we employed you as a digital marketer.
Well, I was going to say, for me, from what I know now, because I came straight from university into the startup, and it has been the perfect place for me to start a career of just learn little bits of different things. And while the job security isn't as good as somewhere like Google or Amazon, I know that I'll gain these skills where I can at least, if it doesn't go well, go to something else and show that I've had experience and not just limit myself when I'm 20, 21 to this one kind of role for the rest of my life.
You're right, man. I mean, look, life is short. I actually gave an interview or as a guest on Kingston University in London a couple of months ago. There was all these students and they were asking me, they were about to graduate. And again, they were they were so kind of almost worried about the future and stuff. And I was don't need to be worried in the slightest. Do you mean you're 21, 22, 23? Even some of the mature students were late 20s. I was look, everybody's doing stuff later in life. This is your experience stuff. It's very, very likely that the job you're going to take next is going to have a major impact on your life. Do you mean it's not like you're going to be doing that when you're 50 or whatever? yeah, you might hit gold, and it might be something you really love doing, or it's your dream job or something like that, and you might be there for 20 years, but I was like, just kind of chill a bit, like don't worry too much.
Yeah, it's all about experimentation in the early years, for sure.
Yeah, when I came out of university, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. You know, and I worked in a few random jobs, do you mean like that? So I worked in like, you know, bars, which I've always loved, restaurants. I worked for Barclays for a year, you know, to earn money. You know, I went traveling after that around Asia for a year. And that was kind of like, you know, like, let's have a bit of time to think, let's do this. I washed up on these shores, you know, I'm from the Isle of Man originally. I arrived, you know, arrived in Manchester, moved here, thought I might be here about 6 months. I've been here like 12 years now, so which is crazy, but it's one of those great places. Fuck, I think I've been here 14 years actually, good God. But you know, like you kind of like, you're here, and you know, I remember taking a job in a startup, and it was like, I think on Gumtree it was like thing, and I was earning like £400 a month for like doing like 50 hours a week, so it was ridiculous. But you know, before, within 3 years, I was like, you know, head of operations, head of community and all that, but you take on the responsibility, you learn from it, you know, you do it, you know, you don't mind sacrificing a bit when your outgoings are low or whatever like that. So you just have to understand you can be like a sponge and adaptable, malleable, learn, because I'm afraid you're not going to get anybody, you know, if you did, say, get a job at a bank down the road, there's a load of them down here, is somebody really going to give you that responsibility? You know, all of the systems, all of the walls, all of the processes, or most of them are already figured out for you. They're just looking for a drone to come in and do fill a thing.
Looking for 3 years experience out of uni, isn't it? Like,
yeah, exactly. Whereas actually you want to be somewhere where you can have an impact on the future of the company, where you can build systems, you can learn an awful lot yourself. You know, you can have a good time as well. You know, that's the number one thing.
WeWork Labs.
Yeah.
That was an interesting one for me, and that's actually where I met you as well. Because I think that part of your life, I think, probably tested you as well quite a bit, I would imagine, just because you saw what it's like to work in startups, successful startups, had your own experience, went through ups and downs, and then all of a sudden you're in this place where all these guys are just starting up, very early stage startups, and you're just overseeing all of that, looking at all the patterns, looking at the things they're doing right, wrong, and you go like, I've been there, I've done that, don't do this, like whatever, right?
Yeah.
So maybe share with us, like, what are those patterns? Like, what are those things you notice that maybe some people are have misconceptions about in a startup, making some constant mistakes in the early stages?
Yeah, I mean, first off, my job at WeWork Labs, you know, massively enjoyed it. You know, I could be that person who once a week was having one-to-ones with our startups. I ran a lab where we had like probably 15, 20 startups in there, where people could, you know, you'd be bumping into them, having coffee with them in the day, you'd be bringing in guest speakers to talk about investment or content marketing or growth or whatever. So it was a really valuable experience, you know, rewarding experience for me to work with so many inspiring founders. Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of them, it was literally just kind of, I think I try in all my ways of life to have something which I call decentralized management. You know, they use it in the military quite a lot, but it's kind of like not necessarily trying to just be the leader saying constantly it's my agenda, you know, like, and sometimes it doesn't work, you know, I've had to learn this through the years in terms of being almost like, you know, this is my way or the highway, not in any rude way, but you know, you always think you've got all the right ideas, you realize that you don't if you have smart people in there. So I think decentralized management is almost being an extra member of the team, and that's how I sell myself at WeWork Labs. I was like an extra member of the team, you know, kicking ideas and playing devil's advocate. And I think decentralized management works quite well because you look at kind of different plans, and I think, you know, if you feel the plan is 80 to 90% there, you know, you can let it go and just say, put that into action and see how that goes. If it's like 60, 70%, then it probably needs some work. You need to kind of, you know, help them an awful lot on that plan. You know, like literally say, look, I think you're missing something here. Like, here's your market. These investors will never invest in you for these reasons. Let's work on this. Or if it's completely the wrong plan or completely the wrong startup, like 50% less, you then just have to literally be fairly brutally honest.
Yeah.
And that's something, again, I found difficult. You know, I tried to put a smile on people's faces. But sometimes you did just have to be fairly brutally honest and say, look, I can't really see how this is going to work, or I can see how it's going to work, but you need about 10 million or something to make this happen. Or did you know there's already 4 competitors out there doing this? How are you going to get this to market? So, you know, like it's...
What were the key things that you know? Like, were there most startups through WeWork Labs and WeWork overall were the ones that had the 90% figured out? Or were there's quite a few that were just like at the 50%, it's just like, mate, you just need to completely pivot this.
Yeah, I mean, again, you don't want to crush people's spirits, and I'm sure there's many startups, you know, you see them, you know, I remember seeing recently Brewdog went on Dragon's Den to try and raise 100,000, they turned it down, and that would have been worth, you know, tens of millions now if obviously that had gone. So, you know, you don't want to crush people's spirits too early, but I think you've almost got to see them make, you know, like realize it. So you've got to approach things in the right way and make them realize it. You've got to ask these kind of leading questions, like who is your market? You know, how would you get that to market? You know, like what are, you know, how much, you know, really you need that much investment? Well, what's that investment going to be like? You know, how big is your team? Is it just you? You know, how much progress are you making week to week? It's about building relationships so as they can trust you and actually believe in what you're saying. But, you know, also you've got to try and give these guys enough room to fail as well, because that's the kind of juxtaposition of it, is that you say something and obviously it could be right, it could be wrong. These things aren't binary, it could be somewhere in the middle. But if you just say something and they haven't tested it out in real life, then it's just a theory, it's just my theory. But if they've gone and tried to bring something to market, or they've got that business plan and you've told them about 10 times that actually it needs to be massively cut down, or that deck is completely way off or whatever, then if they're putting that out to market, then they'll learn on the 10th door that slammed in their face and said, this isn't investable, or actually I don't want to read this plan, I haven't got time to read 50 pages. So, you know, you kind of have to make baby steps early on, then be quite brutal if you feel like, look, you just wasted your time. But then you've also got to let these guys go out there and fail in a way. And investment was the big thing. I think investment, you know, like we all live in a world where, you know, we see big investments coming in, we all believe people are going to invest, but probably the UK market's probably a bit more cautious than, say, the US market. You know, a lot more family funds investing. So, you know, you probably do have to have a business model that's quite strong early on if you're going to raise decent investment, I would say, as well.
Do startups need to raise money? Like, is that almost like a necessity, you reckon?
It's a good question. I would probably say they don't need to raise money, but it does help.
When would be the best time to raise money then? Maybe
Yeah, I mean, I probably would say probably in that first 9 to 18 months, I'd say, if possible. It depends the founder's experience, like whether it's co-founder, like if there was 2 or 3 co-founders and you all had a deep bench of skills and you all had definable roles and you could bring it to market, you probably don't really need to take investment really early on. You know, you might want to pay yourself some wages. Again, it's these things that come into, have they got commitments, have they got families, have they got dynamics, these sorts of things. You know, how are they having to leave a well-paid job to go and set up a startup? But I would say it's very difficult if you're a solo founder having to do everything yourself. You probably want some money to put it out there. I think what investment does is it helps you get to market quicker before the idea is taken by somebody else. It means that you can test out your hypotheses without kind of like enough people actually using the product or using the service. It's very hard to get this data coming back to you of like real life data. And that's how you're going to get to product market fit earlier on.
Become a distraction, just because you get investment money. All of a sudden, there's a lot more reporting. There's a lot more things to worry about. You know, there's a lot of metrics to look at. You know, rather than just I'm just going to do product right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your point as well. But you just have to be fairly lean. You know, like if you raise 500k, don't think, you know, you're going to fly a blimp over the city and then there's 300k of your budget gone, or let's just give everybody pay rises or whatever. I think you probably, again, it comes down to investment decks being very, very solid and kind of, you know, making sure that you have a very, very solid cash flow forecast. Where's this taking to? How much runway have you got till the next thing? What are your kind of thoughts on kind of what that money is going to do to turbocharge your business? You're selling a vision. Investment is going to, if an investor is going to ask these questions from you, with this money, how are you going to deploy it in the best possible way, and where is this going to take you? Is it going to last you 12 to 18 months? Because you're going to probably want to raise more investment. Once you get on the investment cycle, it's 12 to 18 months. Then it's like, oh, another 12 to 18 months. And probably when you close that round, you're going to be thinking again about when's that next thing coming in. So you'd better put that capital to work, and you better deploy it in the smartest possible way that's going to end up with really good results for you. But I think it's a cliche, but I think that first check is very hard. It's still hard for a lot of people to get, really. You've really got to be a salesperson and sell that vision. And also don't forget about things like trends as well. I mean, you've got to be in the kind of zeitgeist, really, because investors love getting on onto a trend which is kind of happening, because a lot of money can happen before consolidation takes place as well.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask, because I'm an employee, I've kind of been lucky enough never to have to think or deal with funding. So my only experience of the funding process would be Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not as dramatic and showy, but is that pretty much the process that founders have to go through in order to get funds? Do you have to sit in front of someone, explain exactly why they've got a great product idea, and then not only good product, but also the model for the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah. I mean, I guess to an extent, the first thing is getting your foot in the door to investors, really. I think there's all these great pitching, I wouldn't say competitions, but there's pitching opportunities where you can go and you'll be pitching, in front of people who are high net worths, or people who are, able to deploy capital. They might be there running a family fund or a syndicate or whatever. So it can work like that. But I think in some ways as well, it's a case of trying to get your foot in the door, which is why networking is so important. Especially on a local level, like say Manchester as an example, you would want to network as much as possible, make good friends and relationships with gatekeepers, people who might be able to introduce you to somebody else. A warm intro is always going to get people to listen to you a lot more.
Is that the best way to actually find investors if you've never raised money before and don't know anybody, maybe you're new to the city? Is literally just networking the best way, or there are other ways can you go be directly in front of investors to do the?
Yeah, I would say if you were in a city like Manchester, and we'll use this as an example, I would say make sure you're signed up to everything like GC Angels and all the big events which put on events for you. You want to basically make sure you're pitching at all these things. Get yourself out there as much as possible, exposure to people talking about you. And that probably is a way then again which opens up networking opportunities for you with people. Don't be too, literally don't be kind of too desperate, I think. You want to make sure you've got cash in the bank. You want to make sure that actually, you feel you're in a good place, that you've projected ahead, that, you're looking to raise investment. But I think the best ways about putting together an angel round is probably to be, building up relationships with people. That first check is all about belief in you as a person. It might be based on your experience, probably more than the idea. It might be your attitude. It might be about can this person, potentially, get this to market and make a success. What is it? 90% of startups will fail, probably even more. That's just the bare facts.
Yeah.
So actually, if an angel investor is going to invest in you, whether it's 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, they're probably thinking they're not going to see that money again. But if it works out for them, then it's this is my big payday. Yeah. So for them, it's kind of a double-edged thing. We're lucky here in the UK. We have things like SCIS and EIS. These schemes are incredible. Every startup should be investing for them. And that means that, the investor gets up to 50 or 30% back of their money once the investment from the government. There's capital gains 0 if you keep the investment for 3 years. Even if you lose your money, you can claim it back on your income tax the year after. So it's a great way to get investing in early stage startups. And I've done it myself, investing in startups. I use social crowdfunding platforms like Seedrs, Crowdcube, those sorts of sites. Democratizes investment, and it's really exciting. You can get involved, talk with founders, read business plans, decks, those sorts of things. Yeah. But from experience, it's the very first checks. It's about investing in the person. Do they have a vision? Can you see them doing it? It's hell of a risky game if you're an investor, but it's do I believe in this person to execute and bring it to market?
Have you noticed something that, how much people, the investors are investing, you said, more in the founder? Because I was always more, yes, the founder is important, especially the track record, but especially if you don't have a track record, if you're new, how important is to have some sort of a shape of a product already, or can you just come in with an idea and sell it well enough to get the money.
I think this is probably, again, like where it comes down to making sure your investment deck is really strong. You know, like, you know, and like making sure that it's clear, concise, and that you're selling big picture thinking. You know, it's like, I don't know, top of my head, there is going to be an $8 billion market for toothpaste next year. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't.
Yeah.
But if you've got these bold statements, you know, this is why we're going to do things differently, and this is why we feel we can take 10% of that market.
Yeah.
2 messages, big macro addressable market, and here's where we fit in. You know, and maybe the third thing is, here's our solution. You know, this is why we are the winners in here. This is why it's important to get in early. You know, those sorts of things. So I think that's very, very important.
The investor needs to understand why he's going to win the lottery, essentially, like, and what the odds of getting in early.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, selling the vision. That's it. You know, vision. Is this person believable? Actually, you know, I'm not talking too much like you know, mafia dons. You know, I am rewatching The Sopranos at the moment. You know, on Now TV, but. It's like, you know, it really is like if you've been vouched for by somebody or says, oh, this person's a great guy, I know how hard they work, or I know their vision, or I know how well respected they are in the company, or actually I've been to a couple of these events, or whatever. You know, those little relationships make up a lot. And, you know, you also have to get your timings right. You know, if you were looking to raise an angel investment, you know, have a think about, you know, tax years, look at family funds, you know, are the high net worths, who are trying to deploy capital because they want to get their SEIS allowance that year. You know, like have you built up a network of accountants in your local area where you can give them a bell or try and give them a shout and say, I just wonder if we could have a quick chat. I'm raising investment for this. If you go on Cedars and you make an investment in any business, they list all the investors' names, or most of them, on there. Get an idea who's putting in 20K in a sports startup, who's, you know, because they might know the industry, who's putting 50K in that hot dog startup, whatever.
Like websites like AngelList, you don't even need to invest, you can just see.
Well, exactly.
Who invested in one for how much.
But I think, you know, in terms of looking at hyperlocal, like a Cedars thing, it's like you could see that someone just invested 20 grand last week in something.
Yeah.
If you're raising investment, they might want to invest 20 grand in you this week.
Yeah.
It's not to say that just because you're not on Cedars or something like that, you know, you can see that. Send them a message on LinkedIn. In fact, don't send a message on LinkedIn. Find their personal details from LinkedIn or something like that, and then send them a great personally crafted thing. Here's my deck. It'll take you 2 minutes to read. If you've got any questions, give us a shout. It's, you know, it's a numbers game. Top of funnel, you might get from 100 outreach, you might get 3 or 4 great conversations, or 10 great conversations would be the goal. But, you know, you'll probably find, you know, you'll end up, you know, building up great relationships as well.
I want to take it back a bit now.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our audience listeners are people that are either fresh out of university trying to decide where they want to go, or people that are working in a big company and are debating whether they should join a startup, you know, what are the risk factors and stuff like that, right? You know, in the beginning you mentioned that you see it as a positive that it sprints. It's 2-3 years to go on to the next thing, right? For a lot of people, that would be scary. Like, they want the job security. They want to know, oh, for the next 20-30 years at least, I'm good, I'm golden, I can find a family, I can have a work-life balance, and stuff like that, right? So at the end of the day, you know, joining a startup is still risky, right? So what would you maybe suggest those people to consider and evaluate when making a decision whether to join a big company or a startup, right? Because I was in that place. When I moved to Manchester, I was like, oh, do I join this startup?
Yeah.
Or do I go to Co-op Bank and be a graphic designer there? You know, and there was a lot of things to consider. I was really like on an island. So I think having an answer from somebody like you would be really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say to people, like, especially in their 20s, is like, you know, don't worry about the risk so much. It's like, what is the worst that could happen, you know, in terms of failure? You know, like, if it doesn't work out, you know, what's going to happen? You know, you're paying for your flat, rent, maybe some outgoings. You probably aren't going to have kids. You probably aren't going to have, you know, a family set up. You probably aren't going to have mortgage, investments, whatever. So probably your 20s is probably the time to, you know, make stuff happen, you know, feel like you can take a bit of a risk, even investing in stocks and stuff like that, you know, feel you can get in early on different things, you know, like, and take that risk, you know, what is the worst that could happen, whether that's an early stage startup or your own business. You know, I wouldn't say I've got more risk adverse. You know, obviously I've got 2 kids, been married for 10 years, you know, obviously things are going all right, house, all that sort of stuff, but, you know, obviously you get to a point where you do more due diligence, you know, you make sure the role you're taking on next or whatever, you know, that you have a blank, you know, security blanket of cash, those sorts of things if anything went wrong. And also even when I joined Subkit just now, you know, I'm one of the founding team, you know, obviously I act a lot of due diligence of the CEO myself, you know, where's your vision, where do we see ourselves getting investment, you know, let me have a look at the deck, you know, a few times, you know, let me ask loads of questions, those sorts of things. So you've got to do your due diligence as well. But if you're in an early stage, like if you're in your 20s, like have a great time, learn a lot. It might seem like it's soul destroying if things don't work out after a year or two, but you know, actually then there's the perfect opportunity to join another startup because startups want to hire people who've been through startups. They get the fact that it's like it's like the Wild West, you know, you're constantly kind of rocking and rolling like through each day. But again, you know, they need people who are adaptable like that. If you go and work in a bank and then you want to get in startups, well, you first off, you're either going to go the full 180 and go, God, I really want startup life because actually I can't work in this environment of being in a bank or something like that. Or the other side is if you've worked in a startup and then you go to a bank, it's going to be very hard to kind of go back to a startup because you become, you know, almost like you become like this grey, beige version of yourself. If that's not kind of you want to, you know, go out there and have that kind of dynamism on a daily basis, the new experiences. And there's an awful lot of camaraderie as well from being in a startup. You know, I'm not saying, you know, I'm trying to look around for the foosball table here, Jonas, but you know what I mean? Like, you know, something that's a bit more, you know, you want to be playing ping pong, you want to be having beers and pizza, you might be working late into the night, you might be going for beers after work or whatever, but there is that kind of camaraderie of everybody working together on something, and that's what's really exciting. Yeah. So, you know, it's easier said than done. Doesn't suit everybody in the slightest, like, you know, and don't get kind of brought into this whole Gary V or whatever of like, you've got to hustle constantly and, you know, it's almost like a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle being in a startup, but it's also damn hard work. You've got to check in regularly with yourself. And usually the issues that, you know, you think are big issues aren't big issues, but you just obviously always wanting to work on that and make sure that you're going like in a direction where you see yourself going forward as well.
Yeah, I think because I can't speak for every 22-year-old who's just starting the career, but I think for me it's not whether it's a huge company or a startup, it's more the fact that I'm learning every day. And these kind of early 20 years are where I'm going to kind of learn my trade kind of thing and get that experience. And then it's further down in the line when I can start to properly kind of plan out, okay, this is the company I want to be in, or this is the location I want to be in. Now that I've actually had that experience, it doesn't matter if it's a startup or like a huge company.
Well, look at yourself. When I get to pension age, it's probably like 75. It's what, 67 now, 68 or something? God knows. You know,
far away.
If retirement is what COVID's been like this last year, then I don't want to get retired, because if this is it, just sitting around the house every night going, like, is this it? You know, shoot me at 60 or something, do you mean? But it could be like 85 when you're, you know, you're what, 17 years younger than me? Christ almighty. But, you know, it's kind of true, you know, it's like, but it could be 85 by the time you're that. So the gap before you've got to get your shit together, you know, people are getting married later in life, people are having kids later in life, people are doing that. So you've actually got this weird period now after, say, school, uni, whatever, where you've got 10, 15 years to figure it out. And don't forget as well, big businesses, traditional companies, they're almost like trying to disrupt themselves now. Do you know what I mean? They're trying to act like a startup. Yeah. They're trying to do, so actually, the more experience you've got in startups and fresh ideas and creativity, look at the banks from fintech. They're having to now think in a different way. They're redesigning their apps, they're redeveloping their systems, they're building communities, they've got co-working offices that are free to their customers. They're having to think like a startup. So, you know, if anything, you know, working a startup and putting yourself in that is like the dream job to get out of a thought. Do you know what I mean? So it's, you know, so yeah. I wouldn't worry, like, look, pension age, like I said, I think that's always something I keep in mind. What is probably the age you'll be working until in some way, unless you win that Euro Millions, man, or you do hit it lucky with a startup and go, wow, those stock are worth like 4 million now or something like that. I can retire at 50 or something. But, those kind of things as well, you have to bear in mind. Like you've got that gap between, say, 22 and 85. It's a hell of a long time to fill. Yeah. So these next 10, 15 years, enjoy yourself and take on that. I have
a question for both of you then. So I know you're quite fresh to Subkit, but just, you want to join a startup tomorrow, right? How would you evaluate a startup? What would be your criteria? And same would be for you after having all that experience and being at your age at the moment, because you're in different kind of life places right now.
You hit me where it hurts, man.
Well, for me, naturally one would be the job security, but then the main thing for me would be the role, as in what I'd be doing day to day. Like, so I came into this role with a passion of kind of sports and fitness and kind of social media, filmmaking, and you told me explicitly, these are the things you'll be learning, as well as learning a few other things. So I was like, this is what I want to do, because one, it's in the field that I'm passionate about, sports and fitness, but also it's doing the roles that I want to expand on. If I went to the job interview and you said to me, you're going to be doing this one thing, I'd be a bit like, unless it was the one thing I'm passionate about doing, I'd be like, maybe it's not for me. But the fact that you came and said, these are the things that you want to do and I can offer you these, that's kind of the selling point for me. And it was, nice office and all that.
Yeah.
How are you, Jonny?
I would probably say mission number one. And that's only because, I'm far from some wealthy person who's like, I exited and do this for fun. That's not my situation in the slightest. Do you know what I mean? So, but a mission, I think, is number one. It has to be something that really gets you excited. I think opportunity is the big thing. Like, what's the opportunity for the company? Because I think everything is tied into then, like, in terms of how big can the team get, what can we build, where can we take this. And a big driver for me is stock as well in the company, like early stage stock, because that really motivates me on a double level to be like, well, this could become something that's so big. If I have a percentage share in the business, then actually it's an extra driver that kind of motivates you. And that's something which I've always looked for in different companies and have built up small stock holdings in different companies. Yelp, it was quite good. It, made sure that it could help in terms of house purchases and, buying other stock in other companies and stuff like that. So, by far, I think that's always a main driver as well. Yeah.
Do you want us to flip it around to you then?
No.
Jonas is like, well, actually, there's anxiety medication, so.
So was that the main reason you joined Subkit over others then?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually almost took another job. I was literally like,
I had a feeling you did.
Yeah, I was very, very close. I actually told our founder, that like, look, I am about to sign on the dotted line with this other company. I when you could just see yourself doing something and it just kind of ticks a lot of boxes. My job is going to be working with loads of exciting yoga instructors, chefs, personal trainers. It's working with interesting people doing interesting things. It's telling stories about interesting people. It's helping them run, start, run, or grow a winning business. It's helping them be a successful entrepreneur, solopreneur, whatever. So that was always the big thing. I could really, even from day one, see myself doing this in a big way. But also early stage. I love early stage so much. Like I said before, I love the journey that you can go on. I think for me, it's like, there is so much opportunity there as well. The team which I've just built, I'm really excited about those guys. We hired some incredible people, got so much energy, they've got so much vision. I don't have all the ideas, and I'll quite happily say that. I've hired people so as they can be part of this team, and together we're chipping away at this problem, if you will, in terms of how we're going to get to market, how we're going to grow. But like it is, and that's the opportunity. Investment was a big thing for me as well. Like, our founder was, had a plan for investment. We closed our seed round. We're already on that Series A trail now, which is really exciting. And like obviously you've got to put that into plan. But I think having those conversations about like, is the CEO and founder believable? Are they trustworthy? Like are they? Like do they have the vision which is going to get investment down the line? Investment is such an important thing. You don't want to run out of runway. That was a big thing in terms of this as well. And it was very believable.
So was it the founder that got you over the edge to Subkit?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Because obviously, don't underestimate the amount of time you spend with these people, right? I spend time with these guys a lot more than I spend with my wife and kids.
Yeah.
So it has to be the right thing.
I was going to say.
It has to be a good chemistry. It has to do the right thing.
What I'd say as well, yeah, it's a case of building relationships as well. A lot of trust is given. Like our founders run a few startups himself, worked in startups, which again is, that's another tick in the due diligence box. It's not just like someone offers you a job and you go, yes, please, I'll take that, I'll sign up straight away. Sometimes, yes, you have to do that in life, but, in terms of this, it's like, you do your due diligence, you make sure that actually they got the experience, and they've got the emotional intelligence as well, that if something you're trialing out on a commuting content level doesn't work, it's not just like, right, I'm going to fire the whole department and that isn't working. It's having that actually there's an opportunity for us to breathe, an opportunity for us to test out, for us to iterate, to put things into practice that actually, like maybe will fail. The thing with OKRs, we were talking about that before, like you've got to basically have the freedom to experiment, and I think that's really, really important. But, like nothing gives me more satisfaction as well. Like when did I join Subkit? It was probably, 9-10 months ago. That was a deck. That was the deck. It was 12 pieces of paper. Yeah. That was it. We've just started running our own in private beta events where we have a working product all natively built. We have our first beta users testing it out and using it. We're doing it. And that was a really exciting moment to see a vision from a deck turn into something that's real. And that's only step one. There's probably 12, 15 steps on that journey, the customer journey, user journey, whatever, startup journey. But actually, it was really cool to see that put into place. And that's like, right, okay, brilliant. And you want to see the founder with a smile on his face. You want to see that, we've got there, just the start. But, like that's what you want to do. It's a relationship you're building at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because even when I'm recruiting people, I really look at them questioning me and questioning the company, almost like speaking to an investor in a sense, because like there has to be a really good reason apart from just monetary, because most of the time you're not going to hit market rate.
Yeah.
Why is your company better? Like you're almost selling your company to the people they're recruiting than the other way around.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And like if people are too keen, maybe you kind of have to, maybe not necessarily question it so much, maybe they're just full of exuberance and excitement and whatever, and that's kind of the people you want as well. Because attitude is so important as well. If you're hiring on kind of both sides of the coin, I'm someone who, especially I check in quite regularly on like, the vibes of my team, the kind of company, what can we be doing to improve things, constantly almost having an audit of things that we're doing, and like, making sure we can improve that. Again, the team I'm building right now is very early stages, so we're still figuring this stuff out. But I think it's important to have, like, what are we trying to get to with all these things? Like, what's the actual reason, the goal, and the target behind either meetings or processes or systems, or even kind of like any of the work we're doing? What's the long tail? Can we look at what the end goal is going to be for that, and then scale it back and work backwards towards it?
So what are you the most excited about next? What's the thing?
Well, I'm hoping lunch soon, Jonas. No, I mean, I'm excited about hopefully coaching my guys on my team that I've hired into the future leaders of Subkit. Right. Like it's, I'll make no bones about it. I'm doing a lot of, it's interesting. I've been an individual, so again, a bit like startups, I've just gone from being an individual contributor for 6, 7, 8 months, looking at everything from vibe, brand, tone, whatever, to now like doing all the stuff, even hosting my own podcast, the Go Solo Show for anybody out there. But basically, like having to do all the work yourself to then managing a team again, which I've done in the past a lot of 5 of us now, but then trying to get myself out of it so I can work on strategy with those guys. So really, I think the next step is coaching these guys, building the systems, and hopefully we raise Series A at some point, in 12 months, say. It's putting a team under these guys. That's the exciting thing. You want to be getting to a point where there are very solid structures in place, so that it's a bit like the Wild West right now. I think I mentioned that before. People come in and it's like, holy shit, like we've got a lot to do. We've got to figure out what to do, and even the things that we're doing, are we doing the right things? Yeah. But I want to get to a point where the next round of people, say we hire 12 people on my team who come in after this, they can fit 3 or 4 of them under each of the guys. Yeah. They've got specific roles. They fit in. The company culture is there to a point. We have HR ready. We have that right. And actually, we have something then which is scalable, almost like what that growth equation is. What's that kind of marketing going to be like? Like what's that kind of community vibe like? Building a community, I'm really excited about. I love building communities. That's what I've always done.
You do. That's your thing.
It is. Yeah. I love it. There's nothing more I love than bringing people together. I don't know where the end game is in this, Jonas, but I'd love to run a bar or a pub or something one day. I really like being around people.
See you do that.
Yeah.
See you
just keep me away from the actual pumps, But that was the original dream I always wanted to have growing up. I always like being around people. I like kind of hanging out, and I like, again, a lot of hard work in that. But I love food and drink, and I think at some point in the future, I'd love to do something like that, where it's more of like a localized thing. I have no visions of setting up a massive chain of 50 bars or something. Yeah. But, at some point in the future, I like the idea of that. So I love building communities, like I said, is so important. I think there's so much you can get of value from that, not only on a personal level, but actually the word of mouth referrals, the quality, the NPS, the just general kind of like evangelism of what you're doing. And also think of let's say Subkit is software, it's up here. It's going to be great software. But actually, if you've got a community telling people about it, they're talking more about the stories and the people and the people behind it, not the they're not talking about features. They don't, oh great, you can log in or you can do this, you can do that. Great, but it's more probably with Orfi, it's kind of like, who are the people you met there? Yeah. What was the vibe like? What was the user experience? Those sorts of things. So I think that's what I'm excited about. People, the future of the company, where we can take that, and the community that we're building as well. That community doesn't exist yet. It doesn't, but it will exist.
Yeah, see it. Yeah, definitely see it.
I want to grow a global community of solo entrepreneurs. That's the mission. In terms of which I've set my team. That's what we want to basically do. We want to connect yoga instructors all over the world, and connect personal trainers. There's an awful lot they can learn from each other. Yeah. Maybe we might start doing some meetups in bars and stuff all around the world. I don't know, but we've got to figure those things out. Yeah. But that's the exciting thing.
That's the fun part, isn't it?
It is. It really is. I love getting involved in that. A lot of stuff to sort out before we get to that, though. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, Jonny. I think, what you're doing is absolutely great. I think you're a perfect community builder. Just when I met you at WeWork, I saw the impact you give on other startups, on the people around you, the kind of advice you give, how you lift them up, and what you're doing with Subkit and your Go Solo podcast, I think it's amazing. It's really good.
Cheers, man.
Much success to that. But thank you for coming over. There was some really great insights. I hope that was valuable.
Yeah, thanks to you guys. Yeah, definitely. I hope I haven't just spoken my usual waffle for an hour. So great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers.
So that will round up season 1 of Startup Dynamics. I hope you enjoyed this season, the full 10 episodes. We grew a lot doing it. We learned a lot, and we're super excited for season 2. It is coming. It is coming this year, but a bit later. We'll share dates. For the time being, any feedback, suggestion for us, we'd love that. And we'll see you in season 2 of Startup Dynamics.